Masculinity is a precious gift from God to the church, and this special combination of talents, charisms, and characteristics have been much maligned in the modern world. So what's a father to do? Stay tuned for our Dads panel, Cultivating a Healthy Masculinity in Our Sons.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hi, I'm Lisa Mladinich, your host, and today I've got Walter Crawford, Tom Weishaar, and Sam Nicholson, three great homeschool dads here to talk about cultivating a healthy masculinity in our sons. And I'd like to introduce these great guys to you. Walter Crawford is the founder and president of Homeschool Connections. He and his wife, Emily, are homeschooling 4 of their 6 kids in Texas. Tom Weishaar, LPCC, is a pastoral counselor at Pastoral Solutions. That's found at CatholicCounselors.com. And he is an advisor on their Catholic Home app, and his wife and he homeschool their 3 children. Dr. Sam Nicholson is an instructor at Homeschool Connections teaching logic and philosophy. Sam holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Virginia. He's also the facilities manager at St. Thomas Aquinas Church in Charlottesville, Virginia, and with his wife Eleanor homeschools their 6 children. Welcome, gentlemen. It is good to see you all.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So I just want to introduce the topic again, because I think it's very meaty and very important right here and right now in our world. We are here today because as Catholic home educators, we really need to stand up for our boys. Masculinity, along with marriage and the family generally, are under vicious and unrelenting attack in our culture. And of course, we see that as a spiritual battle as well as a cultural one. But recently, a good friend and colleague, a good Catholic men's coach, said that most boys are emasculated in their youth, very early in life, and so they never really fully get to embrace the goodness, the power, and the purpose of their God-given masculinity. They're made to feel wrong about themselves, toxic, and that shame marks their lives in a deep way. So we're not going to get into the healing side of it, even though we know Tom could give us a lot of insight there. But let's talk about the positive approach. How do we, as Catholic homeschoolers, just cultivate that healthy masculinity? So what I'm going to do is go around the room in alphabetical order, just with some quick starter questions, and then we will dive a lot deeper very quickly, folks. So Walter Crawford, start us off by telling us, how old are your sons and how long have you been homeschooling?
Yeah, well, we've been homeschooling ever since, I guess, when it all started in the beginning. Was probably about, let me think, I'm just doing the math now. We've been homeschooling for about 17 years now, roughly speaking. And we have 3 boys, 3 girls. The oldest boy is 21 and about to be 22. And we have a 12-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old, and one that just turned 8.
Oh,
so I got the whole gamut.
Yeah, you do. You've got a lovely range there. What about you, Sam? How long have you been homeschooling? How old are your boys?
We've been homeschooling for over a decade, if you count, since our kids were born. I have 3 boys and 3 girls, and the boys are aged 8, 6, and 4 months.
Oh, wow. So you've got the younger end. That's so sweet. The Nicholson family, very young. Tom Weishaar, how old are your boys or your son, and how long have you been homeschooling?
My boys are 11 and 7, and I've got a daughter sandwiched in the middle at 10, and we have been homeschooling since the beginning as well, so a little over 10 years now.
Wow. So good. There's so much that you learn along the way. Okay, I want to go back around. Walter Crawford, what's important about this topic to you personally?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think you kind of framed it well in the beginning. There's an onslaught of our culture against traditional values, specifically Catholic values, I think in many ways. But so from my point of view, that's probably the thing that I'm keenly aware of. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the best at advocating for all the things we're talking about. But I mean, advocating, yes, maybe the example is probably where I can sometimes, in my own failings, struggle with. But I will say that in terms of importance, I think because it's such a preeminent issue in our culture right now, with transgenderism as an example, I guess you would call it gender dysphoria, from using perhaps Tom's phraseology. Um, you know, those things, when they present themselves, create such confusion. And if a man doesn't know, if a young man doesn't know who he is, meaning he's a man of God, then it's really challenging for him to treat women the right way too. So there is that cascade effect. It just doesn't simply start and stop with a young man not knowing his gender or not knowing how to behave properly. It also affects all of his other relationships. And so I think from my point of view, it's paramount that my young men, the three that I have, are keenly aware of what they have to do to exhibit godly virtue, and how that's reflected in their relationships, whether that be with God or with us as parents, or with their siblings, or with any other relationships that they have outside the family.
Well said. So much we could respond to in that, but I want to give everybody a chance here. Sam Nicholson, what are you hearing that's important in this topic for you?
Yeah, well, there's obviously the difficulties involved in the culture and all the things that we're all probably familiar with by now as Catholics, which is the assault on masculinity, denigrating it as toxic. But I think when it comes down to the way that I approach it with my boys is, my parents were divorced when I was very young, and I had a lot of early life difficulties, many of which stemmed from the failure to see modeled in my life healthy masculinity. And in retrospect, I'm able to see many of the things that I wish I had been taught, both in word and in example. And I strive to try to give that to my boys, ultimately because I want them to achieve their last end, which is to be with God in heaven, but I also want them to live good lives. And there are some things that are just essential to cultivating the virtues and having a happy life that can only be taught through observing a male role model. And when that is not present, there are just so many difficulties. And we really, I think, underestimate how hard it is to figure out on one's own how to do even very simple things that seem like just they ought to be automatic for an adult to figure out and know how to do. And in fact, you have to be taught that. And I can see from my own track record of mistakes, particularly in early life and my late teenage years and early 20s, that a lot of those difficulties stemmed from just not having male role models in the house.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you for your vulnerability on that, Sam, because I think there's a lot of that around. We have so many coming from backgrounds like that. Tom Weishaar, what's important to you about this topic?
Well, I'm a Marian, so I'm in the Militia Immaculata, so I'm in Mary's Franciscan Army, and I'm biased, but I believe the greatest army in heaven and on earth. Anybody wants to join, welcome to join. And I'm also a Marian helper with Marians of the Immaculate Conception. So spiritually and theologically and philosophically, I care deeply about masculinity. Sister Lucia of Fatima said that the joyful mysteries are the most important mysteries of the rosary for our times because they're the mysteries of the family, and the family is the battleground of our times. And so having a healthy sense of masculinity really safeguards our family culture from the culture at large. And Sam did a great job of referencing kind of that culture at large. He also did a really a good job at indirectly referencing Scott Hahn, who says that in our childhood, more is caught than is taught. And in the family culture, I think what so many Catholic dads want to do, and certainly what I want to do, is to give my children that healthy example of masculinity that they're going to catch. And when I grew up very much in the secular world. So I was exposed to a lot of the early feminization of men and masculinity. I was also, I grew up in the sports culture. So I grew up in that machismo type of culture as well, which was its own kind of toxic masculine culture. And what I've really discovered as I've grown in having children and in being married in the Catholic faith is this authentic Catholic masculinity that's so fulfilling that what I always say is it feels like my life didn't begin until I got married. And it really didn't feel like it began until I started having children. And I so very much want that for my sons, that they can know the same fulfillment, either as husbands and fathers that I have known, or should they be called to the priesthood as spiritual fathers, to know that fulfillment.
Beautiful. Thank you all. Oof, goodness. The three of you have already but just hit home runs. We could stop there and have given everybody a lot, but we are just getting warmed up, folks. The next thing is, and this is very closely related to what you've already started to talk about, gentlemen. Walter, say a little bit about how you define masculinity and say a little bit about where you got that from in your life. Where did it come from?
You know, I saw the question, and the first time I was thinking about it before we actually came on, and the thing that comes to mind, my instinct is always to trying to define it what it is not, right? And I think we've kind of touched on that a little bit here so far, but in terms of what it is, I'm a real big advocate. Well, first of all, I'd see it in my dad, but I would say that when I think about men that I respect, that I've enjoyed getting to know, is that notion of servant leadership. I know it's a very common phrase that you hear in a lot of different facets in business and whatnot, but I would say that the person that puts others before themselves, I think, is critical to that which, and frankly, is real appealing to other men. I think when they see that behavior, whether it be in the form of a coach on the field, a dad on his knees before the Blessed Sacrament, or the dad in small ways, opening the door for the wife or his young girls, and holding back the young men to say, no, it's not your turn yet. It's your sister's turn. Let's put them first. Doing small things like that, I think, are instructional, right? And so that's one aspect. I think the servant leadership idea is one way. And then the other aspect, I was just thinking about it, is appealing to the Serenity Prayer. I know that it has and I'll restate it here, but I know it has a lot of broad applications. But it's one of the things that comes to mind. It's the idea of that, and I'll say it: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that the courage aspect is a thing that kind of appeals to me as a man, and I hope that would help appeal to my young men that I'm trying to help raise. Because I think without courage, so many things, it's the things that happen in the society that are bad never change because men don't step up in courage to make that change. Or to at least attempt to. And so I think that's really key. And wisdom, that's something that we all pray for, right? And we try to, age helps with that, experience helps with that. But knowing what to do and when to do it and how to do it, whether we'll maybe do it or say it, it's something really important that I think all men need to know, all young men need to know. And these are lost things that I think our society simply doesn't encourage or foster. But if we could do more of that, and I guess those are the things that would help define masculinity. The Serenity Prayer and servant leadership. And I said my dad was a good example to me in that. I didn't know it at the time, Yeah, it's amazing how your parents get smarter as you get older, that kind of thing. And it seems to me that that's I look to my dad, and he's a good example of that.
Mm, so good. Thank you, Walter. And Sam, as you're listening, what's your definition of masculinity, and where did it come from in your life? You said it wasn't really present to you in the beginning. So this should give a lot of people hope who are maybe single parents or had broken, situations growing up themselves. But where did you find it?
I think that everyone has the ability to recognize it to some degree, even if you don't see it modeled in your immediate environment. And I think that one of the tricks is to figure out over time, what is it that you're admiring when you see someone who exhibits and displays healthy masculinity. And for me, one of the common denominators is, this is going to sound a little bit abstract, but it's self-overcoming. And what I mean by that is a phrase that always stuck with me when I was going through some difficult period of my life and I was trying to get my act together, is that someone looked at me and he said, winners are people who will make themselves do things that they don't want to do. Losers are people who do whatever they feel like doing. And one of the things that I've tried to cultivate in my sons is this idea that if you want to achieve anything, and ultimately, if you want to have joy, then you've got to be willing to do certain things that you don't want to do. But if you will stick with it and you will sort of overcome your initial resistance to it, your own laziness, your own appetitiveness, there's something on the other side of that that's more fulfilling. And one of the most obvious ways in which this comes out is just achieving the basic virtues through, the process of mortification, right? Mortifying your appetites and growing in virtues, self-control, and so on and so forth. But it also comes out in social contexts too. So Walter, for example, mentioned servant leadership. And I see that as a paradigm case of self-overcoming, because what you've got to be willing to do is to take your own personality out of the equation as a leader and look at things solely from the perspective of what is it that needs to be done. Not how I feel about it, not what would gratify me in the moment, but what is it that needs to be done here, whether I get the credit for it, whether I'm recognized for it. And so it's almost as if you don't even matter at that point. You're simply pursuing the good. And so obviously we have, the figure of Christ, who is the ultimate paradigm incarnate of masculinity, and his prayer where he says, it is not my will, but yours, right? That he wills to do the will of the Father. And I think that for me is the common denominator. It's just this ability to be able to put aside what it is that I want, what it is that I feel like doing, and to do the difficult for the sake of something greater. And when you see masculinity exhibited, that to my mind is the common denominator, the thread that ties it all together.
Wow, so good. The more you guys talk, the more inspired I'm getting. Yeah, Tom, how do you define it, and where did it come from for you?
Well, masculinity is God-given. So there's an objective reality to masculinity that it's a gift given by God. But the real question, I think, is how to define it. And it's very associational in how we define masculinity. Toxic masculinity, I think, is actually a lot harder to nail down than authentic masculinity. And I think the reason is that toxic masculinity involves missing the mark. And there are actually a wide range of ways in which you can miss the mark. And we see that with all the different varieties of toxic masculinity that are out there. From, kind of this association, be kind of nice, but kind of weak, seek pleasure and avoid pain, almost deify yourself and become self-indulgent. There's been a movement that I found bizarre and truly just bizarre. It goes to show how bizarre evil is. That in devout Catholic circles in the last 3 years or so, there was the toxic masculinity movement to equate being into the liturgy with misogyny, with the mistreatment of women. and having this almost redneck approach to how women should be treated if you love the liturgy, which I love both women and the liturgy. Thank you. And, obviously a great example of toxic masculinity. But then we get more toward what hits the mark, right? What Walter and Sam are talking about. And I think in that case, the things to associate are courage. Walter mentions that. Sam mentions overcoming the self, which ties in very closely with self-sacrifice that Walter also talks about. There's virtus, the root of the word virtue, which literally means strength, right? That a man needs to be strong. And what I would add that I think is so essential for husbands and fathers is emotive. I would also add affectionate, right? That it's this dichotomy of man that's almost never addressed in our modern society. And it's this image of Saint Joseph, one might say, right? This one who is willing to labor, who's willing to fight, who's willing to protect, who's willing to proceed with courage in the face of adversity. And at the same time, one who has the courage in the home to be vulnerable, to be affectionate, to be loving, to be caring. I've worked with clients as a therapist in a lot of really negative situations involving masculinity. And in 100% of the cases, the culture is involved, and the culture came in and really did negative things. But before the culture showed up on the scene, there was a lack of closeness in the family. Diabolos, where we get the word devil, means divider, right? And so what happened before that toxic culture from the outside showed up is that the toxic culture from the inside wasn't quite right. And dad wasn't close enough. And if dad allows there to be cracks nowadays, that's where the culture really gets in.
Wow, that's so good and so powerful. I feel like this could be a series because it's so rich that you're bringing up so many great points, all of you. And I feel like the threads are weaving together. Folks, we're going to take a short sponsor break to hear from our sponsors at Homeschool Connections. And we are talking about cultivating a healthy masculinity in our sons with Walter Crawford, Sam Nicholson, and Tom Weishaar. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Walter Crawford.
And I'm Maureen Whitman.
We are the co-founders of homeschoolconnections.com and proud sponsors of the Homeschooling Saints podcast,
which is here to help you homeschool more joyfully, more easily, and more effectively.
We want to thank you for listening.
And we invite you to check out our courses at homeschoolconnections.com.
And now back to our program.
All right, we are back with Tom Weishaar, Sam Nicholson, and Walter Crawford. We are talking about cultivating a healthy masculinity in our sons. So let's go around the room again, starting with Walter. Say a little bit about how you're working in your own family to cultivate a healthy masculinity and what kinds of fruits you're seeing so far.
Sure. Yeah, it's probably it's practical. It's all the things we're talking about in action, right? And one of the things that I found to be the most effective way to encourage masculinity is to be there with my sons, to do stuff with them. I mean, it's loving them in action, you might say. Camping, taking them camping, going bowling with them, bike rides, throwing the baseball with them, bike rides. I mean, there's all sorts of things that I try to incorporate. And I think it's those instances that make obvious what it means to be a man. Go to church. One of the things I'm dogmatic about is whenever, absolutely possible, we go as a family. There really is no my dad and, that person wants to wake up a little later, goes I'm not saying this is bad, by the way. I'm just saying it's important that I think, in my estimation, that going to mass as a family is really it's he gets a chance to see me on my knees. They get a chance to see me on my knees. They hear me pray. We say the prayer, we say the prayer rosary at home together. All these singular instances add up to, oh, this was what it means to be a dad. This is what it means to be, you know, a loving father. Those types of things. I think it's those instances that translate into action for my sons down the road. They need to know that they're loved, and they need to see that I make mistakes too, right? I'm going to make those mistakes, and that we can recover from them. I think the other side of that is, and it kind of hits on, I think this is really important. We're all going to make mistakes as dads, as men, in front of our sons, away from them. But it's showing the kind of, I guess, character that, admitting fault and saying, that's on me, and I need to apologize to them if it's something that I offended them in some way. It's those kinds of things that I think go a long way, because one of the things I think, and if that's just being a good person, by the way, that's important for just being a good person. But I think in particular for a dad to show that, hey, I can make mistakes too, but I also can seek forgiveness from the same people I offended. That goes a long way with family members. And I think for sons in particular, it shows that, hey, I can make mistakes, and yeah, I can still be a good person too. That there is forgiveness even within the family. And I think that those are some of the things that I think are really important in terms of the fruits of it. I see my sons. One, the 8-year-old wants to be on the altar. He's not quite there yet in terms of age. There's a requirement at our church, but I think we're going to get him in early to go into daily mass and doing it, having him becoming an altar server then. The 12-year-old, he is learning to his own identity, right? He's trying to figure out where does he fit in the hierarchy of his friendships, you might say. And so I'm trying to encourage him to find his own identity, right? Don't be a follower, be a leader, but he's in terms of fruits, he's the one who pushed me out of bed on right after, I guess it was Holy Thursday Mass. He wanted to get up and go to adoration, so we did that. And the oldest, I mean, he's blazing his own trail right now in college. So I think that he's proven to be, he's becoming his own man now. I mean, even as we speak. And so I've seen a lot of those things happen. The way he treats women, the way he treats his sisters. I'm seeing a lot of that. So, in a very good way. So I think those are kind of the things that I think that, most importantly, how I'd advocate for it, how to encourage it and also the results of that. It seems to be working, but the jury's still out. My goal is to get into heaven. So if I'm there and in front of him, I'm hoping that I'll see him there at some point in the future.
Yeah, no, it's all so good. And we acknowledge fully together as a Christian family, as the body of Christ, that it's the grace of God, right? Making it all work. So let's pass the torch to Sam Nicholson. Say a little bit about what you're doing in your family and what kinds of fruits you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and Walter touched on this, is that we just have non-negotiables in our household. And one of those is that we're going to say the rosary. We're going to do it at a particular time, and we're going to do it in a particular way. And even if we don't feel like it, and we're not doing a very great job, focusing and paying attention, we recognize that we don't have anything more important to be doing right then. I make sure that we go to mass as a family, like Walter mentioned. And one of the things I wanted to do early on, because I am lucky enough, because I work at a parish, that I can go to daily mass most days. My family, they will come in a couple of times a week, but I make sure that no matter what it is, I have to have my work squared away, because it's vital that my sons see that their father gets on his knees and prays and is reverent in church, and that it's not something that just the woman does. And that's something that actually my wife communicated to me. She said it's just so important that, she sees many households where religion is what the woman does. And I wanted to make sure that they see that in me. And then I think the other one is just doing activities with boys where they get some kind of objective feedback from reality, as it were. And so one of those is I go running with my kids, and with my two sons, we'll go on these short runs, and I try to push them, because there's this point at which your body will just sort of scream at you that you're done, you're tired, it hurts, stop. And I'm not trying to turn them into athletes, but what I want them to get out of it is to see that you can go past that point where you feel like you're out of gas and it's not going to kill you, and you realize that you're stronger than you think you are. And that, just what's going on, what it feels like to be tired and to be, uncomfortable is not going to be the determinant of what it is that you're going to do. And you can make yourself do more than you think you can. And then the other one, I think, and this is my 8-year-old, we're lucky enough that he's had the opportunity to be an altar server, and he gets real-time feedback on his performance, because he has got to take himself out of the equation. He can't look at his parents. He can't peer over the altar. He can't play with the other kids. He's got to be just like a statue up there when he's serving, and he knows what he's supposed to look like when he's doing it. And that has been so crucial for him to see that there's something that he has to be careful with and has to pay attention to while he's doing it. And I think that's had a lot of positive benefits for him, just in terms of discipline and just in terms of understanding what it means to do something and to do it well.
Wow, so good. And I love the idea of immediate feedback to all that's building in your sons. That's beautiful. Tom, what are you thinking here about what you're doing specifically and what you're seeing come back?
Yeah, Walter and Sam are talking about a lot of really great things. And one thing that I focus on, again, because I do have the perspective of a therapist, is that kids' foundational relationship isn't the relationship that you have with them, but it's the relationship that you have with your spouse. So the first thing I do for my sons is I really, really try and model a great husband-wife relationship where I'm sacrificing for my wife. I'm focused on her. I'm focused on meeting her needs. She has a vision for our household, and in the domestic realm, it's really important for her to take the lead in that domestic vision for how a lot of things happen. And I always try and support that, serve that. When I work for Greg Popchak, and one of the things that Greg talks about is what a man being the head of the household looks like. In a lot of ways, it's like being the leader of a committee, because some people, again, will use it chauvinistically, right? They'll say, oh, that means dad gets to boss everybody around. No, that's definitely not it. It's much more like being the leader of a committee, and a good leader of a committee kind of guides the committee through the process and makes sure everyone's voice is heard. And so I really try and do that intentionally with my boys. Another model that my boss has that really encompasses a lot of what Walter and Sam have been talking about is the liturgy of domestic church life model for the family, because the family's the domestic church. And so in this model, there are what we call rituals of family connection. And that's a family that plays together, works together, talks together, and prays together, right? And Walter and Sam provided great examples of that. And certainly I try and do a lot of that with my boys. My boss always says, cars run on gas, families run on time, right? And so it's not a lot of the practical side of things isn't rocket science. We try and spend lots of quality time together. I don't do any screen time with my kids or anything like that. My oldest, I run with him. He's an altar server. I also do trail life with them. So like Walter does with one of his boys, I go camping. And boy, the other dads in trail life, they are, it's a Christian organization. We have a Catholic chapter. They are great examples of masculinity. And you can see all the different skill sets and types that my son gets exposed to there, which is really cool. And the skills building type stuff that Sam's talking about, it's really been present there. One thing I really try and do with my boys is I try and foster independent thought, because I honestly believe that if you're not independent with your skills, and if with your thought, that you're probably not going to stay Catholic long once you hit college. So I really, really try and foster that with them. And I'm choking up. I know my sons, I know their hearts, and, I know what they love. So, I do what they love with them. And I like to think they'll always take that with them.
That's incredibly beautiful. Thank you for that, Tom. And I love all the different charisms and personalities and perspectives. And I just want to say to any mothers or fathers or grandparents listening that it's just what you said. They get to see a variety of different good men leading with that gentleness, but with that certainty, with that clarity that there are certain non-negotiables, as Sam said. And all of you have, in one way or another, talked about modeling the faith, which is so critically important. And that's been shown time and again, that if the father is leading in the faith, the children are much more likely to grow up in the faith and all of that. But you're encouraging independence and self-reflection and all sorts of growth and challenge. And so just want to, at this moment, even though we're going to go on with more, just thank you all so much for that. So just in the interests of time, we are going to pull a little switch. We're going to go in reverse order for final thoughts, gentlemen. This has been so rich. We could have gone on a lot longer. I want to just thank you all so much. Tom, would you mind just leading us off with what's important to leave our listeners with?
Yes. So first of all, I want to leave you with a resource. I work for Greg Popchak. He has the Catholic Home app. That's CatholicHome.com. Feel free to check it out. There's all kinds of great parenting resources there, discussion groups. There are experts there who can weigh in on any of a number of parenting issues and provide ongoing support. So it's a great option for a lot of people. Want to make people aware. But one of the things that was a topic, and it's due to me, we had to shorten, so we struck some of the topics. But one of the topics I did want to weigh in is just the impact on our daughters. And one of the really, really big things that I think daughters take away from healthy masculinity in the home is to know a father who loves them so much, but who also kind of guides the boys and instructs the boys whenever there are those tough moments to say, hey, women are respected in this household. And we always say in the world of therapy, there's content and there's process. Content are the words that we're saying. Process is the underlying message. And the content of what we say, which I think a lot of people can relate to in a lot of their homes, is, hey, son, you knock that off. You stop that right now. That's not how we treat especially girls in this household, right? That's not how we treat them. But the process is, you deserve the best. That's what having healthy masculinity in a household says to wives and to daughters. You deserve the best. And to that, I give a great amen. And as a Marian, I always like to say, Mary, she doesn't raise boys. She only raises men. And of course, she embodies households where women are treated with respect. The closer we get to her, the better women are treated. That's the point of Catholicism. And I often pray, if it's just my wife and my children and I'll pray to Mary in a special way for her to be the matriarch of our household, to come in and just watch over us and intercede for us and bless us. May that be the case for my family for all our days, as well as everybody out there. May that be the case for your family as well, and I'll pray for it. in my rosary and my chaplet.
Oh, bless you, Tom. Thank you so much. This is just so beautiful. Sam, I'm going to pass the torch over to you. What's lingering for you that you'd like to say to our audience?
Well, what Tom mentioned about the impact on daughters, I think is really important. And I will say a little bit to that because I think we've all had this experience where we've known women who find themselves sort of mysteriously drawn to abusive and unworthy men. And a lot of it stems from being disrespected in childhood and not cherished by their parents. And it's as if that becomes their template for masculinity, is someone who's going to abuse them and treat them disrespectfully. And what I want my daughters to have is the expectation that men are going to do certain things for them. So, for example, it's just understood that, it doesn't matter how light the package is. If dad has free arms, then mommy is not going to carry it. That's just what we do. And that there are certain obligations that a man has that come just from the fact that he is around women and that he's going to open the door for them. He's going to defer to them in certain ways. If there's something that is labor related or stressful, that he's going to take that upon himself and not leave it to her to do. And I think that that's going to give them the expectation that that's what a real man is going to do. He's not going to be somebody who, displays swaggering machismo and puts me in my place. That's not going to trigger their sense of, oh, this is what a man ought to be. And then the other thing I wanted to touch upon is because we've mentioned a lot of sort of the culture war stuff, and everything that I've seen in sort of the younger men that I get to interact with, 18 to 25 range, indicates that there is this sort of backlash against the dominant culture. And it's not surprising because, there's a limit of how much of the bad, the false, and the ugly we can tolerate. And my real concern for a lot of them, because they're going to form the sort of environment that my children are going to grow up in, is that we learn how to distinguish authentic masculinity from some of these cartoonish displays of it, and that we don't fall for things like machismo, which is like a sort of parody of masculinity. Because I see that this is being a more serious problem for some of these young, traditionally minded men, is that they are able to see what masculinity looks like, but it's got to be something that comes organically from the cultivation of masculine virtues, and not sort of the put on of being disagreeable or trying to display social dominance or trying to look tough. And so it's better that they try to emulate that kind of thing than what we've seen with sort of the simpering weak-mindedness of the last couple of generations. But I think that going forward, they're going to really need help sorting out the authentic thing from the sort of, counterfeit versions of it.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that positive note, too, because I'm seeing it, too, among young people that the scales are falling from their eyes. They want what's authentic and real, and they want what's good, and they want what's good in themselves. And so I agree. I think there is a positive backlash happening. Praise be to God. Walter, what would you like to leave us with today?
I mean, I think that Tom and Sam hit on it very well. They covered kind of the things I wanted to mention. I think maybe the only add I would say, and it's kind of speaking a little bit to what Tom talked about as content, young men can be very quick to disparage their sisters. That happens without thought most of the time. But one of the things I think I've been very introspective as I've grown up, and I thought, what were the real big complaints my sisters had of me? And one of probably the biggest things that in retrospect, I wish I could go back in time and say, Walter, stop doing that, was to be real hypercritical of my sisters in a way that was juvenile. Right. And I nip that in the bud, because I've seen so many young women, even if it's only one comment, it can only take one comment, can be a lasting thought, and someone can embed itself so quickly and take root. And a woman can, a girl can, that could be the guidepost for their entire life. I mean, it can be that it can be that detrimental to their mental well-being and the way they view themselves as well. And so I think it's really important that as dads, we discourage that type of behavior among our men, because it is true that while sticks and stones may break my bones and words will never harm me, that's an adage, but to a woman, to a young girl, it can be very damaging. And I feel like that it's something that we as men need to discourage. That type of at any point, it doesn't matter, even if it's said in jest. I guard against that pretty dogmatically. I don't want my daughters or my sons, for that matter, to even think like they can get away with it, but two, my daughters to fall victim to it, because that's not who they are. And I feel like that's really important. So we've covered a lot. I don't want to take any more time. I think that everything Sam said and Tom said were spot on. So I think we've covered those bases quite well now. But I think that it's really important. I guess my last thought is to say, I think as dads, I would encourage anyone who's listening to foster virtue, be a good example, to walk away with or to model that behavior that you would want. If you were to step aside and watch yourself in action, what would that look like? What do you look like? And is it the kind of person you think you should be, the kind of person that Christ wants us to be? And pay close attention to the way our daughters and our sons react to our behavior, because that's the kind of feedback that we need to pay attention to. That's a good barometer for us to determine if that's something that are we acting the way we should as men and being masculine, or are we being detrimental to them in some way? Are we getting them closer to heaven, or are we taking them further away from it? So I think it's really important to be very self-reflective in that journey, because it's only through that we're actually going to get better. Not many people are going to walk up to me and say, "Have you ever thought about being a better dad?" That's probably not something you're going to get, but that requires some self-awareness, and I think that's really key. So that would be my challenge to everyone who might be listening to this: be very self-aware of the things that they're doing. Some of that can come in the reactions that you get from your wives and your sons and your daughters and whatnot. So,
I love that you ended there with awareness, because there's a church document now. Of course, I can't remember the name of it, but it's about priestly formation, and I think it's fairly recent. And it talks specifically about self-knowledge, self-possession, and self-gift. And there it is, what you guys have just covered. It's so good. So I just want to thank you all so much again. This has been an absolute joy. And everyone, thank you for listening too. We really appreciate having your ear on this show. And we are praying for you. So please pray for us too, and have a beautiful day in the Lord. And again, Walter Crawford, Sam Nicholson, and Tom Weishaar, can't thank you enough. God bless you, gentlemen. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Lisa.
God bless you. Thank you.
And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.